to the Long Take Review, where four college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Greg Cass, and I'm here with a flock of wicked wolves. First, he's a few beads short of a rosary. It's Antonio Elefano. How's it going, Antonio?
This week in my bed in the morning, once in the shower, standing up, which was convenient, just a bath gel. Oh, once in the middle of the night after a dream. I'm doing great, Greg.
I imagine we were competing for that quote when I was writing up these episode notes. So good to have you here. Good to have you discuss a fun film, which we'll clarify in a moment. But speaking of sin, he's a harlot and a whore. It's P.T. McNiff. How's it going, P.T.?
You're right. It's storytelling. The rites and the rituals, costumes, all of it. It's storytelling. I guess the question is, do these stories convince us of a lie? Or do they resonate with something deep inside us that's profoundly true that we can't express any other way except storytelling? I'm doing great, Greg. How are you?
I'm so much better now that you high-roaded Antonio. You're like, you look blue. I'll do something profound. And that's right, listeners. You just heard her laughing, so you don't have to be afraid that this is an Oops All Boys edition. Finally, she's young, dumb, and full of Christ. It's Jen Sobchak-Bankard. How are you doing, Jen?
Here's what's going to happen. Benoit Blanc and I are going to ask you all some questions, and you're going to answer them, and we're going to get to the bottom of who killed Monsignor Wicks and why, and then that's it.
I am shocked that none of you went for the accent. I was prepared for lots of really bad Foghorn Leghorn voices. So
I was going to, and then you introed me with a different character. So I was like, I guess I got to switch.
And listeners, Jen was so excited that she got to pick an opening quote. That was her first reaction to my offer to be lead host today. So nicely done, Jen. Welcome to the club of surprising people with quotes. So dear listeners, if you were under some mistake, those were all references to the film we are here to review today, which is Wake Up Dead Man, the third installment in the Benoit Blanc series from director Rian Johnson of Star Wars The Last Jedi fame. I am saying the Benoit Blanc series, Netflix. I refuse to call these Knives Out mysteries. That doesn't make sense, and I won't do it. This new Holy Whodunnit features Daniel Craig's famous sleuth, he was on The View, alongside the holiest of holies, Josh O'Connor, and a star-studded congregation including Kerry Washington, Josh Brolin, Glenn Close, LTR favorites, Andrew Scott and Kaylee Spaney. I think I just promoted both of them to LTR favorites, but we'll see if anybody objects. And renowned hot sauce entrepreneur, Jeremy Renner. After a very brief theatrical run and some notable festival screenings that some of us partook in, this film is now available on Netflix. If you're listening to us for the first time, we'll have a spoiler-free section designed for those who have not yet seen the film. And then with a very clear alert, we will shift into spoiler mode for the rest of the show. But in case you were unclear, this is a mystery film, and so much of it relies on spoilers. So our recommendation would be just go watch the movie. It's right in your living room right now, and then join us so we don't spoil anything accidentally. Now, PT, if listeners think we're a fancy brand after listening to this episode, what can they do?
We do not know. What is truth? We don't know that. We don't. What exists? Does any of this exist? But if you want to know, you can try to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to The Long Take Review. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, but you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and more. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. We are also on Letterboxd. You can follow the account at LTRpod, or you can search for the hashtag LTRpod to see what each of us individually has been watching. Jen? Greg?
Wow.
Jen, Greg?
Wow.
Wow. The instinct kicks in.
Excellent. Well, I, of course, am very excited to get started on this movie. I've made no secret, especially in my little short take episode, that I thought this was a good time. But I will open up the floor for the short take. So, my dear friends, what was your general reaction to Wake Up Dead Man? Let's start with Jen, since she never gets to do this first.
What? I always have to pick up the scraps, and now I get to go first? So, I thought this movie was absolutely delightful. I had so much fun watching it. to me, I actually liked it a lot more than I wasn't a huge Glass Onion. I like Glass Onion just fine, but I always thought that the first Knives Out movie was the one to beat, and this is coming really, really close, perhaps surpassing it for me in terms of. But there might be some recency bias in there. But I felt like it delivered on the mystery part, and Josh O'Connor was absolutely a revelation in this for me. He I was already a fan, but just how he carries this movie's ethos throughout, and like I think there were a couple moments that took me off guard because they were more profound than I would have expected for a Knives Out movie. I'm not looking for profound moments in a Knives Out movie necessarily. That's not why I'm here, but it really kind of took me aback a couple times. And the ensemble cast here is having a great time, and I don't really have any criticisms. Like maybe there's like a twist that I sort of saw from the get-go, but who cares? It's fun.
Tread carefully, counselor. Speaking of counselors, Antonio.
I agree with Jen. I thought it was great fun. I think that the fact that Josh O'Connor, who's like having a year, we're going to be talking a lot about him, I think, today. The fact that you described it as like a revelation, as him as a revelation, right? Because he's not like new on the scene. We've seen him in plenty, but the fact that I too saw layers in his acting and in his performance that I haven't seen before just amazed me. I got everything I wanted out of these movies, out of this series, while also feeling like this was a distinct entry from the previous two. I thought the screenplay built the world so vividly in that first act. And then it gives way to the central mystery, which was silly and funny, and maybe for me a little bit too long and complicated, but just a really daffy showcase for some of our best actors. PT, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you both. I think this was delightful, and it's interesting. Sometimes it takes the third movie to really sort of understand what a thoughtfully constructed series is going to be like, or maybe has been like. I assume maybe we'll discuss the potential future of this as a franchise, but yeah, the sort of new flavor of mystery, the new sort of type of story that Johnson approaches here is, I think, really smart. I think the injection of sort of deeper personal philosophical debates and wrestling is works really well here and is crucial to what unfolds. And so yeah, I don't think I can quite say I like this as much as the original, which is such a little pristine piece of cinema for me. But it is really close. I rewatched it on Netflix over the weekend, and man, this just feels like a movie I could throw on over and over again. It's how I mean, I actually quite like Glass Onion as well, but I have not been as like, I can't wait to put that on again and again. But in the way I was with the first one. And so, yeah, I think this is a really fun time. I look forward to unwinding some of the structural choices and character dynamics the further along we get. Greg, what did you think that you have to share now that you didn't already share talking about this by yourself?
Well, and it was interesting talking by myself because, especially trying to stay very spoiler free. And at the time, I was probably a little more lukewarm than I am now. I've watched it a few times, and I think, keeping it spoiler free, there were choices made in the film that I didn't necessarily understand that well after my first viewing. And now I feel like I really get. And I've come to really like this even more. I'm sure I'm the most positive across the three. Glass Onion similarly took me for a loop the first time I watched it because it was very, very goofy compared to the first one. And then you realize kind of on repeat viewing that some of that goofiness is built into the plot, that he's trying to be goofy to throw these people off balance, which, both works and doesn't work as an excuse on that. But, I think I was hopeful that this third one wouldn't be more of the same in terms of that kind of heavy cameo. Oh, Yo-Yo Ma's here. Oh, Ethan Hawke's here for some reason. And all those kind of really quick gags. And this kind of felt more grounded in a very positive way. And I mean, I'll just reiterate that Josh O'Connor is incredible here anchoring this. I had the pleasure, my wife and I took a date night and went and saw this at the Alamo preview night. And she was not familiar with Josh O'Connor. This was her first Josh O'Connor movie. And she left me. That's it. She divorced me right there on the no. So she really enjoyed his performance in particular. It was fun to watch it with somebody who wasn't already familiar with the Challenger, the Chimera, of it all, because he's become such a mainstay in kind of movie nerd life, but not necessarily in the general public life. So I love it. I've watched it a number of times. That is disturbing at this point. I've had a lot of fun watching all the reviews come in on Letterboxd and checking in with everybody whose opinions I like to see what they thought. So and it seems to be doing quite well. If I had a complaint, and it has stayed over from the first time I watched it, it's a touch long. There's a part kind of 2/3 of the way through that drags quite a bit. And, I think that it makes it suffer a little bit. And I also agree with some of the criticism that the big expansive cast isn't all used fully, right? There's a lot of really talented people here doing a lot of very small work, or perhaps doing a very bad American accent. I'm looking at you, Andrew Scott. So, yeah. Well, let's not dither any longer. Let's go to the recommendation algorithm in which we establish the audience of a film. Very nice sound work, Jen. So, of course, this segment acknowledges that not every film is for everyone. So the question I wanted to start this with, I think the most obvious answer to like who should see this are people who liked the first two. And we've faced this before when we've talked about sequels. So I thought we'd begin with the question, what would you each say, like, is the appeal of this series for you? What is it that makes you want to see this film? And do you think this Wake Up Dead Man fit into that, or did it miss the mark in some ways? I think that might be helpful for our audience. So we'll go to Antonio first this time.
Yeah. So you used the word sequel. What I like about the series is that they don't fall into the trap that I often feel of sequels, in which every single subsequent movie has to be sort of like bigger and bolder and like. Instead, every entry of the series, it feels more like an anthology, even though you've got like one character threading through, where every single entry needs to be different. It has to have a different focus, a different theme, a different aesthetic. And so for me, the pleasure of watching these movies is that Rian Johnson clearly is writing these when he feels like inspired by something, or has a reason for making these films, and has like a point of view that he wants to illuminate through the prism of this very familiar genre, with this very familiar character who we've all come to love. But by putting him in these different settings, it's, I opened by talking about the world building, and so the fact that it didn't just feel like a sort of recitation of like a familiar story, and it felt instead like, oh, this is just like new. Like, this is just, I can just sit back and sort of enjoy this, know that there are going to be some familiar things that I really love about this series of movies coming up, but that it's going to be in a context that feels novel to me. That's what makes these exciting, as opposed to just sort of like, okay, here's another one. Let's see what happens next. So I think that's the main appeal to me. Jen, what about you?
So I think first and foremost, I'm just a sucker for this genre. I have a memory of being in 7th or 8th grade, and the first short story I ever wrote was a whodunnit. It probably was not very good, but
get it on Substack. Get it on Substack.
I mean, I don't know where it is now. I hand wrote that thing at the time. So I think I really love that and appreciate that Rian Johnson seems to be such a student of the kind of Agatha Christie whodunit, but he's willing to kind of play around with it a little bit. And so I think I also really like Poker Face. My husband, as a counterpoint, like, does not like Poker Face, because he's like, okay, but they tell you who did it at the beginning. Like, I'm out. Like, I like this genre to be able to follow along with the mystery. And I think, I think with that, with the Knives Out, you still get that, but there's still the kind of like little flourishes of extra stuff. And also just the kind of clue nature of like having a starry cast and everyone's just like hamming it up is just very, very fun to watch. And I think like I understand with this one especially how the bench is so deep, and you have actors that really could be carrying one of these movies on their own, but instead just get kind of like a little bit part. But at the same time, I think that's what's really fun about it, is that you're like, oh, who is this? Like, and they're just chewing on the scenery. And so I think those are kind of the two things that I really appreciate. The kind of the mechanics of the mystery, the puzzle box aspect of it. Yeah.
PT, for listeners who can't see him, he is talking to us in front of a giant mural of Daniel Craig coming out of the water in Casino Royale.
Yes.
So obviously you're here for the Daniel Craig of it all, but what else draws you to this series, PT?
Well, I mean, I put that up because I thought it would look better than what I usually have, which is just a giant portrait of myself. So, yeah, I mean, I do think there is something like, it's funny. I'm getting a lot of Wake Up Dead Man related content because the algorithms are pretty smart and know what I want. And so I have been enjoying that. And I did see a clip of an interview with Rian Johnson where they brought up one of the internet things that is discussed sometimes, which is he needs to make a movie that's a Muppet version, but with Benoit Blanc, with Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc as the only human. But there is something to that where it's like, it's all these, like, he's the only constant and really everything else changes. It's like him, and then somewhere there's Noah Segan, and somewhere there's at least a voice cameo from Joseph Gordon-Levitt. But other than that, the whole world could change around him, and that's fine. And he, like, it's interesting to think back to that first Knives Out and people being like, what is happening with Daniel Craig? What is going on with this accent? How is this possible? And I mean, I'm a big Rian Johnson fan. Going back to, I saw Brick in the theater when it came out, and there was no, he was not a name or anything. And I remember being like, I don't know if this movie's going to be good if Daniel Craig's going to talk that way, but it's such a fun character. And they have done, like, this almost like Law and Order cast member way of building out his life with these little hints and clues at the very periphery of these movies that I think do add some real depth to what's going on and give him stuff to play with. But he's also just having such a good time and really enjoying it. So yeah, I think him, I mean, I guess I don't want to say at the center, because he's always kind of just off center in these movies. And then, like, they get to fill in this star-studded cast, as both of you were saying. I understand the complaint that when you get to the end of the movie and you're like, what did this person do? And what did that person actually have? But then part of, you see this roster of actors is, any one of them could do it. Any one of them could be more central to the story. And part of a mystery is you set up all these interesting characters, and then you get to spend more time with some than others because of the way the investigation unfolds. So yeah, I think it's something about the core character detective, the spitting out of different groups of people and ensembles of, potential suspects and potential players in the games. And and then the genre change. We've had the sort of cozy mansion mystery. We had the glitzy vacation boat, ocean island mystery. And now we have a sort of gothic, holy place church mystery in a small town. And I think, those are all very Agatha Christie. And again, the algorithm has fed me Rian Johnson talking about something that I will reveal before we go into spoilers. Jen and I saw this at the Newport Beach Film Festival with Rian Johnson coming out and talking afterwards about everything except this movie, because I don't know why, but that's something we can discuss at a later point. But he was saying, when talking about the other Knives Out movies, he loves that Agatha Christie would change modes, change genres, that this idea that Christie made the same story over and over again is totally false. So I think, this idea that there's just an almost infinite number of ways in which you can put your famous detective into a mystery is appealing to him. And I think so far he's 3 for 3, for me at least, in, making those changes and trying these different setups. Greg, what do you think? Why do people like these movies? Why do you like these movies, Greg?
Greg loves these movies.
I
Let's
love
be clear.
these movies so hard. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the first Knives Out, I was attracted because of the giant cast, and then I trusted Rian coming off of Last Jedi to put something together. But I've watched that movie so many times because I'm still catching all these little details. And Jen talked about those intricacies of how one of these is constructed and how, you almost absolutely, it's like essential to watch them twice, right? Because you have to see where you were fooled and how it all played out when you know the answer. But then it's rare that one is constructed as well as these so that you want to watch them over and over and over again. And, I think you're absolutely right that you don't have to go any further than the character. I've been watching them, all three of these now, with my son Henry, who's 10 years old, and he wanted to watch all of these because he really likes Benoit Blanc. And if anything, his review of this one might be smaller because there were no really really funny Benoit Blanc quotes. There's some gems, and he does some funny kind of moments. There's a little more physical comedy, I think, in some ways, but yeah, there are no like really great Benoit lines. So he was maybe a little disappointed, but did enjoy this. His favorite might be Glass Onion, though, because that's the funniest. So it's been really engaging to watch with him. And then I do find I was asked Friday night, I was hanging out with some friends and somebody asked, I'm going to introduce my new girlfriend to these movies. Do you think I have to start with the first one? And I really found it an interesting question because I don't think you have to. And my answer was no. I think these could stand alone. But part of the richness of this is how little jokes pass through. And PT name checked Noah Segan showing up in all of them, as he does in all of Rian Johnson's movies, and then Joseph Gordon-Levitt. It took me a while to catch him in this one, but you can find him. He's here. And like I really love in the first film, Benoit Blanc brings up Gravity's Rainbow, and he says nobody's read that book. And then in the second one, there's a Williams sister, I believe it's Serena Williams cameo, and she's reading Gravity's Rainbow, which is such like a small like gag that I do think you appreciate if you watch these in order and they build. This one actually does have the smallest of little links, which is that Mila Kunis, who we haven't mentioned, Mila Kunis, Mila,
yeah.
She says that she got Benoit Blanc's number from Detective Elliot, which is Lakeith Stanfield from the first one. So we do actually get a little chronology here that they don't 100% stand alone, and this one has to come after that one, but not in any way that matters. I will actually say I think this is probably the least intricately constructed of the three, but there's stuff to enjoy here. There was a big spoiler that I missed entirely on my first couple viewings, and my wife caught and she clued me into, which just made it so she's winning our marriage now, which is just upsetting. So, yeah, and I think this delivers. I can't imagine anybody watching this and being totally unsatisfied if they like the others in the series when it comes down to it. I will leave this one open-ended. Does anybody have any comparisons for this one specifically from outside the franchise? Anything you would say, if you're not sure, if you haven't tried one of these, here's what you might like?
Yes, but it's sort of like
spoilery.
No, obscure. It's a sort of just like, if you have seen this random movie from the mid 80s, perhaps you would like this very prominent movie that's all over Netflix right now. But there's a movie starring Sean Connery from 1986 called The Name of the Rose, in which he is a friar who's trying to solve a mystery in an abbey in medieval times. And that also has what I think are kind of the sort of elements of this movie where it is a discussion of religious devotion and concepts, as well as a murder mystery about who did this thing and what happened. It does not have exactly like the same Agatha Christie-ish. It's based on an Umberto Eco. I'm not sure the pronunciation there. Novel. So it's more serious minded than the Benoit Blanc stories are for the most part. But I do think, and I don't think this is a spoiler to say that, this movie has a lot more moments of depth and examination of spirituality that I would have expected, having seen the first two movies with the detective character. So I was thinking that, and I was thinking, potentially other movies that have some of that exploration. Martin Scorsese's Silence is also sort of a, like, what does it mean to have faith and be a Catholic and all of that stuff. But I think it would have to be like, oh, I want another movie that's wrestling with faith. I don't mind that it's around a gothic murder mystery that has a bunch of, jokes woven in as well. So it's not exactly the same, but I think that's, if you like, Poirot movies and you also like something like that, then I don't know why you haven't already seen this, but that's my recommendation.
I just want to give a quick shout out to, there's like I think it was BBC or maybe ITV. There's a British mystery show called Midsummer Murders. I don't know if anyone's watched that. And I think there's a certain, obviously Wake Up Dead Man is not British, but despite having many British actors in it, but I think it does have that same kind of coziness that maybe I would not associate with, at least with Glass Onion. The first Knives Out had a little bit of that too, because it's like a mansion. But that's I think if you like that aesthetic and kind of vibe, I think this one as more so than the other Knives Out movies will appeal to you.
Well, and there's a shout out. Benoit Blanc looks at Father Duplessis and says, "Go to town, Father Brown," which is another long running British mystery series that I think people are big fans of. I don't know why there's such a British like priesthood solving murders industry over there, but it seems to fit some need that they have. All right. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to get out of the way before we go to spoilers? All right. Hover that finger over the button, Jen. We are about to go into spoiler mode. So if you have not seen Wake Up Dead Man and you don't want it spoiled, and believe us, you really don't. Even if you think you do, you don't. So please go see this film in theaters if you can still find it. I think it's out there still a little bit. And then rejoin us for the rest of the conversation. Hit that button, Jen. All right, Jen dictates that the biggest spoiler has to be spoken right after the spoiler music. So I will say the Marvel guy did it. Jeremy Renner, guilty. Also Glenn Close, who somehow hasn't been mentioned yet.
Who's a Marvel gal. Don't forget Guardians of the Galaxy.
No, that's right.
So yes. So any whodunit is going to hell or heaven based somewhat on the resolution of the central mystery. So this time around, I would offer the commentary that the answers are a bit more convoluted than in previous entries. So PT, I'm going to throw it to you first because I don't think I've given you first crack yet. Did the central mystery work for you? Did it all come together in a satisfying solution, or are you still wondering what the hell happened? And I can swear like that because it's about God.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, please blaspheme away. But I liked the mystery, and I did think that it resolved well. I remember the first time I watched it feeling like there was a moment. I never thought like, oh, this is going too long or is too convoluted, but there was a moment when things were turning, and I was like, oh, this doesn't feel like right, or doesn't feel like it's going to be satisfying. But then there were one or two more turns where things kind of locked in, and it was like, oh yes, that makes sense. I do think that there's a fair, I don't want to say complaint, but there's definitely a fair possibility that the fact that like the biggest name in the ensemble is the sort of final confessor and the final person who, was really the sort of architect of the whole thing in the character played by Glenn Close, that it was just sort of like, yeah, of course it's going to be Glenn Close. Like, look at this cast. Like, that's who it's going to be. All due respect to everybody else, but like, she's the one who needs to have the big powerhouse, like closing confession scene. And she does. And, part of this will be our problem when we get later on in the episode and later on in the season. But like, Glenn Close has been looking for an Oscar. I think that Glenn Close should be heavily campaigned in Best Supporting Actress for this because she's really good, and not to preempt Oscars watch, but you can't really push for that without like it becoming clear. Like I think anyone who is sort of thinking about this, who is somewhat clued in, is once it's like, well, the person you'd campaign for this is probably Glenn Close. It's like, well, Glenn Close probably has some big scenes, especially later in the movie. So on that level, that wasn't subverted in the way that sometimes Rian Johnson's good at subverting expectations. People's mileage may vary. So that kind of did end where it felt like it would end, but it also made sense. It made sense the way that things were. I'm curious what other people thought, and if how many of the switchbacks and turnarounds were too many for them. So I guess, Antonio, I'll throw to you because I know that you said there was a stretch where you were like, nah, we don't need this.
Well, I mean, I still enjoy the movie a lot, but the recipe for a successful murder mystery is like perpetrator plus motive plus method. And providing compelling answers to those three questions is the screenwriter's task. Revealing these three facts in rhythm is the director's task. So here, where you have sort of like multiple perpetrators, multiple motives, and multiple methods for multiple crimes, you end up, I think, kind of diffusing some of the pleasure from what I think like John, for example, right? What Jen was talking about, where like John likes to solve the crime. I think that when you have so many layers of things that are dependent on like other layers for the next stage, it kind of makes it where like you can't just be like, so and so did it for this reason, and in this particular way. Like it's almost impossible, I think, like within the first hour of the movie to be like, I have a theory on like what it's going to be. There's no way it can be accurate because it's withholding too much of the foundational information for you to get to that. That doesn't necessarily like ruin the film for me at all. Like I still had a lot of fun with it, but it just it took away that part of it. And I feel like the best versions of this kind of mechanism are ones where like I'm surprised by something, but not because I was withheld like a bunch of information that I really needed in order to get to it, but just because it was sort of like deftly hidden by the director in the course of the film. So I still had a lot of fun with the mystery, but at a certain point within those twists, I sort of just I was just kind of like, I'm just going to watch this. I'm not even going to like think too hard about like piecing this all together. It's just sort of unfolding, and that's fine. Jen, what do you think?
I would say that in my short take, I mentioned that there was one twist I thought was maybe too obvious. It is the Glenn Close factor, and I don't think it's. I think her conspicuous casting is actually only half of the reason that it's sort of like too easy to figure out that she's going to play a big role in the conclusion of this. Part of it is just because her character. She's like so incredibly suspicious from the second you meet her. You're like, there has to be something up with this lady. Like she's just like so, and part of that is a trope thing too. Like I think a classic sort of like when you have a situation where you're trying to make everyone look suspicious. The older sort of housekeeper maid, just, like groundskeeper, like that kind of servant, like I don't want to say servant, but I guess that's sort of what she is. You know what I mean? Like that, the person in that role who wears all black and is like kind of cagey and stern and like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, come on. They're obviously going to be suspicious. And so I did, but the thing is, because of what I said earlier with Rian Johnson, deeply understanding kind of the tradition of this genre, but then also kind of being willing to play with it, I was like, well, maybe this is a fake out. Maybe, and so it's interesting because that turned out to be right and also not right because of what Antonia is talking about, that there's like, it's a multi-layered mystery. So yeah, she didn't totally do it, but she was guilty of part of it. You know what I mean? Like, so, but that worked for me. I think for me, I don't necessarily need to have solved the case before we learn what the actual conclusion is. But for me, actually, the more the fake out was, for some reason towards the end, I really thought that Jeremy Renner's character's wife was going to play a big part in the revelation. Part of that is me being low-key racist and being like, wait, but maybe or racially profiling some of the cast, because the son, who we find out ends up being Josh Brolin's son, right? I was like, well, maybe like Jeremy Renner's wife cheated on, like, I thought that was all going to come together in some kind of like big reveal, and it didn't. And I was like, oh, I was relying too much on the skin color of the people in the cast for my theory, and that was my mistake, my bad. But because of the butterfly imagery, like on their wallpaper, and they had made a point in a photograph of her to show that she had like the butterfly pin. So I was convinced that was gonna, like, that was the house of cards that was gonna come down, and it didn't. So, but I had fun coming up with that.
When they first go into Renner's basement and they're like, "What's that smell?" I was like, "Oh, he murdered his wife, and his wife's dead down there." Like that's going to be a separate thing, which is not what happened. That's fine.
Right.
Greg, what did your wife see that you didn't see? And is she going to talk you into ear extension surgery now to make you look more like Josh O'Connor?
Oh, well, and did you get served the video about how he loves Ratatouille, and people think he looks like the main character in Ratatouille, which totally works. So the Back to the Future style gag is what my wife caught, and I did not catch. It's not actually a clue into the mystery, but the church at the end has been renamed. Did you catch this?
Oh yeah,
no, I saw that I saw the change in the letters of like he welcomes all instead of welcomes you, which is
so when he's called to the church, it is the Lady of Perpetual Fortitude, and then at the very end of the film, that's part of the sign, but up above it's been changed to Lady of Perpetual Grace. So it's been renamed after Grace, which, man, I had like 4 things I was going to say in response to Jen, but PT nicely segued into the next question with that leading question to me. So maybe we'll open it up and I'll come back and talk about butterflies. But, I think we've all been talking about how this really tries to like talk about faith and does something deeper and more spiritual and religious with its themes. And actually, there are a couple of questions that relate to this, because I do think it's pretty central. But I guess first, like, did this work for you as a kind of exploration of some of those key themes? And then I really wonder about like how people who are, I don't want to speak for people on the call, but I did cover Conclave with you. So I don't think any of us are like devoutly religious or so deep into our spirituality. Do you think people who are on the other side of that divide will kind of pull us into it as well? So Antonio, since you are dressed like a priest, why don't you take that one first?
Well, for me, I think the emphasis on religion is actually, I found it to be a kind of a smokescreen for its focus more on contemporary politics and cults of personality. The only character who I think treats religion really seriously is Josh O'Connor's father, Judd. But you're right, like to PT and to all of your points about his treatment of religion and his discussion of religion and these really sort of beautiful like monologues about why he's come to religion and why it's important to him. That culminate in this sort of graceful revelation with Bridget Everett, of all people, the comedian Bridget Everett as Louise in the middle of the film. So that part was really lovely, and I thought the best use of religion and the best thinking through what religion is for, and it resulted in the character making a decision about how he was acting in the plot that actually stemmed from his religious conviction, which I thought was good and was nice. But the other ways in which I thought that religion could play out didn't play out quite as much as I thought. So, for example, Benoit Blanc talks about himself as being like the rational one, right? And so I thought that there was going to be more sort of interplay between, like a Mulder and Scully, right? Like someone who of faith and someone without faith. But because Father Judd is really the only one who seems to be like sincere in his sort of devoutness, and the rest of the cast play sort of caricatures of religious frauds, then that didn't seem to me like as the interplay with the cast is not where I got my main takeaways about religion. What do you all think?
So I think to answer Greg's original question through your answer, I think that what you're describing will make this appeal to people who are very religious or like their faith is very important to them, because I think they will identify with the Josh O'Connor character, Father Judd, because he is like something good and pure in organized religion, and everyone else around him is sort of like warping faith and ruining it for everybody, or ruining it for people like him, right? And so I think if you are someone who is frustrated, maybe we should have brought this up in recommendation algorithm, but if you're someone who's but then that maybe that would also give away too much. If you're someone who's frustrated with what organized religion in the church or different churches have become, and how they have become a little bit more about the cult of personality, or about certain agendas that you don't agree with being more political, or you know what I mean, like if you're just really disillusioned with all of that, this offers you some like recentering, right? To sort of be like, no, there is a way to be religious in a way that is pure and good. And so I think that would appeal, like, so I would recommend this movie to people who are very devout and faithful and tied to some kind of religion. So but for me personally, not not being like that, the big appeal of the sort of religious thread in this is actually as a counterpoint to Benoit Blanc in a very sort of Sherlock Holmes way, right? So like the idea of rationality being pitted against faith and spirituality, and the kind of interplay between the two of them, in terms of like, and really in a way that like genuinely, it is not a false dichotomy. Like the movie's not like, oh, but like Benoit Blanc is right the whole time. We come as close as I think we have so far to Benoit Blanc failing, right? There's a point in this movie where he's just like, maybe I can't solve this. What? Like that's impossible. And I do think that like the interplay between his idea that like, no, this might look like a miracle, anything that looks like a miracle is just solvable. And there's one of my favorite Sherlock Holmes quotes is that he says, when you have eliminated all which is impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth, right? So this idea that like, no, we can figure this out no matter what. Like there's a logical explanation to everything. And I think that when I was writing my dissertation and working on my Sherlock Holmes chapter, my dissertation advisor, shout out to Laura Green, who will never ever even know this exists. I kind of brought this idea up, and I sort of had been talking in my chapter about how Sherlock Holmes represents pure rationality and logic and reasoning and sort of like the scientific empirical truth. And she sort of pushed back and said, well, sure, but like anytime he actually makes kind of like a logical observation, is heavily reliant on social constructions and assuming things about people socially and economically based on their appearance. So it's not purely logic. He's just sort of proposing it that way. And I think this movie plays with that a lot too, in a way that's really cool. And that's sort of what Antonio was talking about, that like, it's less about actual spirituality and more about sort of the perception of it and kind of the rhetoric surrounding it, and kind of like how people can be using those sort of social mores to gain power. And now I'm rambling, but so that, I don't know. So yeah, I thought it was a rich text in terms of that kind of stuff.
I'm realizing why we let Jen talk last all the time, because now it's tough to follow up when she has all the smart stuff coming from. I will say all that was great, and I think correctly insightful about sort of there is that false dichotomy that's set up between the two of them early on of rational versus religious. And what I liked, which, you know, this is in line with what I think you're saying, and maybe speaks to what Antonio was saying about like, it wasn't as much a Mulder and Scully thing because Benoit Blanc is very deferential and sort of just like, I need this guy. So like, okay, he's going to go do a priesty thing. Like he's going to get on the phone with Bridget Everett for what looks like a long time. The sun goes down while they're talking. So he's like, okay, like but he doesn't complain about it, but he has sort of look impatient, but isn't pushing that. I think what I like in that dynamic over the course of the movie is he's so Blanc is so focused, and I agree with his perspective for the most part on things, where he's just like, it's not a miracle, like this is a murder, like there's no miracles, there's only the things that people do, but that like what the sort of guidance and grace, as it were, that's shown by Father Judd to the people around him, like that is a miracle in its own way. And I think there's the interesting, there's these moments where which feels very accurately reflective of upstate New York, to the degree that that's close enough to New England that I can speak to this weather, where it's very sunny, and then suddenly the clouds move in over the sun for a minute or two, and then it suddenly looks like it's almost dusk, and then the sun comes out again. That coincide with Blanc talking about like rationality and the lie of religion and all of that. It gets dark, and then Father Judd talks about something, and then it gets light, and that happens a few times. And then at the end, when he sort of realizes like, oh right, like there's something in what Father Judd does that is beneficial, and like he has that moment where he's like, I will not do the sort of big flourish at the end as the detective. It will be better for everybody involved if I let this person come in and give a confession. And so there is that sort of like embracing of it, which is coincided with, I was raised religious, I left religion, or he says his mom was religious. And then obviously there seems to be something that coincides with what we know about him from Glass Onion, which is he's Hugh Grant's lover. Of course, we all remember that from Glass Onion. But I think that there's all of that wrestling about what does it mean, and that political component that I think Antonio is totally right. The knock against Knives Out and Glass Onion that Rian Johnson is too online, and that's too sort of seeped into the story, I think has those elements of the movie have unfortunately aged really well, because being online is now just existing in the world, because all of those crappy philosophies have become dominant in our culture. So I think that does that is a nice transposition of it into the cult of personality, and what does it mean to be sort of this like old school a destructive, attacking Catholic versus the nurturing, like daily bread kind of Catholic that Father Judd is. So I think all of that kind of mixes in, and I think the idea that Benoit Blanc sees the value in the Father Judd version, I think is good. Again, I think there are the sort of J.D. Vance adult convert Catholics who would just be like, I love Father Wicks, like this other guy sucks, like he is bad, like Father Wicks is totally right, and therefore this movie is bad. I don't know if they're reachable with this, but I think for most people who are the kind of people who go to church every week, I would like to believe they would find a lot in this and would feel like, oh, this is a good reflection of what I believe. Hopefully, Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so I wrote this question, I think because this is something I found particularly moving. And from what I've read in interviews with Rian Johnson about this film, places he actually does talk about this one, I think he and I kind of are in the same place in our faith and spirituality, which is I was raised very religious, church every week, Sunday school. I went to summer camps with Bible summer camps up in the White Mountains and such. And then as I got into college, that kind of faded away as I, expanded my own mind and learned other perspectives and learned about other people. And when I look back on that period, I don't really I'm not filled with regret or shame about having either fallen for it as a child or fallen off it as an adult. But what I find myself kind of thinking about is those kind of very human good things that come from religion, right? And PT, your opening quote is by far my favorite moment in the film. I love this idea that yes, it is all just storytelling. And Benoit Blanc, in the line before the one you gave, Benoit Blanc says, it's a story being shouted at me that I just don't believe. Whereas Father Judd says, but what if it's a story? This is what PT quoted. What if it's a story that is the only way we have of expressing something that's deeply true inside of us? And I cannot recall a film embracing belief in that kind of way before, and really kind of opening up in a very legitimate way, a conversation about what it is to believe and what it is to fall off that belief and this kind of structure for it. You're all baiting me to do rational versus intuitive man again, and I won't do it. People can listen to that old episode, but I do think there's something really powerful there. And the piece that I haven't heard you all vocalize is just they are so deeply opposed to each other in terms of belief, but there is not a second where they're not locked into each other and like deeply moved by what the other is expressing, right? Benoit Blanc's first speech is about how it's all so terrible, and he's like, "Sorry, I offended you." And Father Duplessis is like, "No, it's fine. You're talking the truth. That's all that matters, right?" And they welcome each other and they hear each other. And I think it's in that kind of embrace of each other, that literal at times, that this movie kind of does something really different. I don't mean to spoil a single Coen brother movie, Honey Don't, now available on Peacock, but Chris Evans of former Knives Out plays this kind of parody preacher that I think people of faith are used to seeing, who's like a really awful guy. Chris Evans is literally like having sex off stage in between parts of the service and so on with parishioners. And it's like this awful kind of corrupted version of religion. And so I think I would be like surprised if somebody who was a deep devout believer, even a Catholic, watched this and felt disrespected, because I think it's true that, you know, Father Duplessis is right in terms of his worldview. And Antonio shouted out my other favorite moment in the film, which is this gorgeous scene in the middle where everything just stops and he reminds himself to be an actual minister. That comes back around at the end when Benoit Blanc tells him, you know, do what you were born to do, take her confession, be her pastor. And then in the last moment, and I'm going to use this as the transition, when he, you know, Glenn Close has confessed, she's asked for forgiveness for Father Wicks. She's asked for forgiveness for Dr. Nat and for Samson the groundskeeper. He won't give the forgiveness until she also admits that she owes an apology to Grace, and she asks for forgiveness for Grace. So I don't even know whose turn it is. We'll go to Jen. So Grace is this really interesting figure. I asked the person who watched it the longest ago about something really intricate. So we did have some kind of pre-episode talk. There were some people in our orbit who were like, I don't understand what the heck happened in this movie. And I think part of that might be centered around Grace. So Grace is Monsignor Wick's mother, who had this child out of wedlock. And then her father, the former rector of this church, Prentice, right, forced her to live with him in order to get her inheritance, built the church around the idea that she's awful and fallen and a harlot and a whore, like PT. So then Prentice dies, and she's supposed to get this inheritance, and he denies her the inheritance. He hides this jewel instead of that, which kind of kicks off all the events of this film. And as I said, my very smart wife, much smarter than me, pointed out that in the end, they renamed the church after her, right? Like, it is Grace, as in, you know, capital G Grace, but it's also Grace the person. So, what do you think's going on here, Jen? Do you think, what is Rian trying to say? What is the film trying to say with all this kind of convoluted backstory that all happened 60 years before the events of this film start, really?
Well, I think that the ending you're describing really makes it seem like the whole point of this was to reclaim the past, right? The idea that the church, sort of capital C, and the power of the church as an institution largely abused Grace, right? And that like and made her to the sort of pariah, and kind of get like foisted all this guilt and shame on her, and that she sort of tried to regain what little power she could, in the only way that she thought she could, right, in terms of the financial component of it, right? And so it really does feel like the Josh O'Connor, and again, I think it ties into what we were talking about earlier with the idea of like good church, bad church, pure church, fake church, and that, you know, Father Judd represents one, and then Monsignor Wicks represents the other, right? That he presents himself as being this like benevolent figure, but really is sort of out for his own personal gain and spite and bitterness and that kind of thing, right? And a more aggressive. The other thing we didn't talk about is like his idea of spirituality is like very aggressive. Like, that like and I can't remember, like he's always and you even see that between the interplay, Antonio's opening quote speaks that like that everything is a fight, right? Whereas Father Judd is sort of like, no, we shouldn't be fighting. So that's a really long-winded way of not addressing the actual plot component of your question, but that's to me what it's all about. It's like about reclaiming religion and spirituality and the idea of the church, and not as an institution that is abuses its power, but one that actually is for everyone and takes care of everyone in the way that Father Judd would want.
I might buttress that, because we are talking about churches, with Kerry Washington. Her character gets to say, I've been thinking a lot about your mother and how she had to suffer for having a child out of wedlock, whereas Wicks was protected from that suffering. Even though he was guilty, quote unquote, of the same crime, the same sin, he got to live a life of comfort. So, Antonio, we haven't talked much about Kerry Washington. Did that character work in to your mind at all? Did that work for you? And pull that into any answers you want to give about kind of the role of Grace in this larger story going on.
Goodness. Well, okay. Let's start with Grace and the and the use of her. And I mean, she's the most reduced of all the characters, right? She's called a harlot and a whore right away. And so, the film like very explicitly provides her grace by the end of it, right? Like we're provided an understanding of her, and she's given like humanity and agency in a way that she wasn't. The thing that I was thinking about while Jen was giving her very smart explanation as to Grace was an echo of a film, a lesser film that we reviewed earlier, which was Wicked for Good, and the discussion of Elphaba talking about how like you need a villain, people need a villain, and there is a version of religion that requires there to be something to hate, like something evil, something bad, right? To the point where like sometimes, like invocations of the devil are obviously meant to be very scary. But I think that for a lot of people of faith, an invocation of the devil or an indication that the devil exists could be in a warped way kind of comforting, in that because that exists, it means that the opposite exists as well. It's proof that God exists, because there's this other, if there's force of evil, then there has to be a countervailing source of good. So I found that all sort of interesting. To the point about Kerry Washington and sort of what she brings to all of this, she's a rational person, right? And she's, I think, pieces together her own mystery, right? About Father Wicks, and has her own sort of revelation moment. So there's revelations within revelations, and that I think actually worked pretty well. And I think that the reversal of that scene where Father Wicks is with the people, and Josh O'Connor thinks that the meeting is all about him, but it's actually about his own revelation. That's one reversal that I think was effective. And so I liked that. And, later on you had a question about sort of like how the cast is sort of deployed. And while it's true, not everyone gets like sort of like a real moment of sort of like actorly glory. I think Jeremy Renner actually doesn't get much to do here, and his character is probably the least interesting, even though he's more sort of most crucial, pretty crucial to the plot. So I liked that she had that, even though she's not as central to the murder mystery. I liked that she added that layer of mystery, and that layer I felt was effective. The only other thing I'll add is just a total aside. The silliest part of the plot to me was that a man committed suicide by swallowing a jewel, right? And that seemed the sort of silliest of all things, and a lot it's like hinges on the jewel in his like dead body. So, but yeah, that's my best attempt. What do you all think?
I will say I thought it's on a second viewing. I was like, oh, he didn't mean to kill himself. He just accidentally died eating the jewel. What I questioned was, even 60 years ago, they weren't like, I wonder what he choked on. Like, they didn't like investigate his body after death, but well, whatever. That was, you sometimes you got to hand wave some things away. I think in terms of, I think that the Kerry Washington story, I liked that. I thought that was interesting. I do understand sort of, you get at the end and you're like, wait a minute, who was in this cast? And like, what did they do? And it's like Kerry Washington, Andrew Scott, and Kaylee Spaney. I'm bad at the pronunciation. That the three of them are like, they have interesting potential as suspects, but we don't really spend a lot of time following any of them as like for real red herrings. So therefore they have less to do in the movie. Though, I think that, a rewatch of it does make it seem like, oh yeah, no, it's, you absolutely could have seen a version of this story where each of them could have done it. Like their motivations are strong, but they, I think the Kerry Washington thing, it could be, is a little muddy. I don't think it's a problem, but there is a little bit of like, so you weren't looking into this, you just got contacted about a lawyer about a thing, and then it happened to come. Okay, like that feels a little happenstance, but so be it. For Kerry Washington, but I like that what her core story is that men in the church screwed something up and women had to carry the burden of it. And I think that's how she ties into the character of Grace, which is, and in a way also Glenn Close's character, Martha, where it's just sort of like, who's doing the real work here. I grew up Catholic in a Catholic family who my parents are still, churchgoers when they're, my mom is not as like mobile as in the past. So sometimes she watches a mass on TV, but even within that, she always has been like, they don't treat women well. And it's sort of like, as I grew older and more skeptical, I was like, then what are you doing? Like, what are you doing with this? But I think, that's part of, in a way, part of the wrestling of it is this sort of like, there's this institution and there's this mindset that exists, and you're trying to perfect it or improve it and make it better, but it's still sort of bad, but it's also ultimately like trying for something good. And so I think that dynamic is important there around the gender of it. I also, the name, that is great. Greg, that, your wife did spot that. I will look for it next time. It'll be a motivation for me to watch the movie again, is to get to that final, whatever it is, 40 seconds to make sure I see that. But, I do think the idea of what they turn, the thing they turned their back on in this church is grace, that her name existing as the reflection of the concept, not just this woman as a human being, but also that, there's the path of what the church can either be this closed, like sort of closed door, and from the very beginning where it's fighting, putting up the dukes versus having your arms open. Well, grace is the arms open, and this was a place for fighting instead, and thinking that everyone's attacking us and we need to fortitude. We have to hole up and try to launch a counteroffensive. So, I think that's important to this story. And I also think that because this is to that scene, but the first scene between Blanc and Father Judd is about storytelling. What is religion except something from the past that people keep telling the story over and over again? And like, is it true? Is it what actually happened? Does it have all of the nuance, or is it just trying to gather the meaning that we want to set across? Well, that's the harlot and the horror version of the story, is these people are out here and they're coming to destroy it. That, if we let them in, they will tear everything down and break it for no reason. Then a demonic spirit takes hold of them, and we have to be the fight against it, as opposed to this complicated web of roles and family and gender and money and all of this stuff that's in a way much more common, but also, has all this additional nuance that sometimes that's not really the story religion wants to tell. But I don't know. I did grow up in the strain of Massachusetts Catholicism that is like, yeah, all of this is a metaphor. Like, just go do something good. Be nice to people. For the most part, with the occasional stances on public issues that don't really reinforce that, but for the most part, are that kind of, this is all a story, and but like, it's really just be good to other people that I think Father Judd represents. So a lot of that resonated with me, and I think that's also what I saw in the character of Grace.
I think you've covered my response for the most part, so I don't have much to add to that. Just to note that I would say then this, for all I said a few moments ago about Rian being quite respectful to the church and to the believers, I think the character of Grace is him not letting them off the hook, and the confession scene I mentioned is kind of the apotheosis of that, which is that. You can forgive a lot. You can see a lot in the good that the church can do and the way they can touch, humans can reach each other and we can cross these boundaries. Now I'm making it all sound like the bad scandals. But that humans can do good things through faith and through religion, but we can't excuse everything. And I found it moving. Kerry Washington is a character is interesting to me because she, as is presented, was a young professional on her way up to do good in the world as a lawyer, and was like just handed this 10-year-old and told, you have to raise him now. And she, is very resentful towards the end. She's got one scene that's probably a little overacted, but she says that money is one psalm in the Bible of my bitterness, or in the book of my bitterness. And like, it's hammed up in like a delicious way, but maybe just like 10% too much. But I do really like that. Like at the end, like she just kind of walks away from it. She just smokes a cigarette and moves away because she's devoted to that. But she invokes the good old boys a few times, right? And I do think that that's a way of making sure the kind of misogyny of the church is not excused in the kind of processing of the real and the great. So I think we've largely covered a lot of these questions, but I want to give everybody the chance to jump in with like somebody in the cast that really wowed them. And then after we all give our other answers, we can just talk about how great Josh O'Connor is for a few minutes.
Can I quickly interject a little note about the sort of plot mechanics of the ending? I think the other thing to keep in mind, especially if you're on the side of like, why was this ending so, maybe according to you, needlessly convoluted? And I think part of it is the Gothic strain of the story, because, and I might have talked about this already on our Frankenstein episode, but classic Gothic storytelling is everything seems spooky and supernatural, but really it comes down to sort of like petty social things like greed and power and that kind of thing. So like the diamond, I think, is very representative of that idea of like, it's almost treated like a cursed artifact through most of the movie. And at the end of the day, it's like, well, no, it's just worth a lot of money. And that is what Monsignor Wicks was interested in, right? And then the same thing with the resurrection idea, right? Of like, it was meant to restore faith in the church because everyone would be like, oh my God, it's a miracle, right? And then, but at the end of the day, it really was just a distraction or a diversion to cover up for this like very petty crime, fighting over this jewel, right? So I just wanted to put that out there, is that a lot of the plot mechanics of the ending do have to serve this Gothic plot to be like, oh, everything, and that goes into what Benoit Blanc is going through too, right? Of like, everything that seemed impossible and supernatural did at the end of the day have an explanation, but it was, everything needed to be explained kind of in that context.
Well, and we haven't yet talked about how, he does give away his kind of checkmate moment. He volunteers. So he could solve this crime. He has all the pieces. He knows it, but he takes solace in Father Judd's message that it's meaningless unless it's done of its own free will. And so gives the wicked, the guilty, the chance to do it themselves, which just folds into all these religious themes on top of that. But very well said, and way to take it literary. Also, it was PT's turn, but he had just talked, so I was all confused. So now I can throw it to PT directly because you took a little time, and say, PT, anybody else in the cast you want to give a shout out to that stood out to you, or moments you liked?
I mean, it feels easy for me to overlook him, but Josh Brolin's doing great work in this movie. Like, you need him to sort of be that guy. And, I feel like it would be really easy for Father Wicks to be reductive and obvious, but when he's making his cases, his sort of, like, especially when he's one-on-one, the whole bit with he's like a take my confession is very funny. But then when that builds up to, he punches Father Judd and is just sort of like, are you mad? Like, are you like, do you want to like defend yourself? Like, I was like, I kind of get why people would be like, okay, I hear what you're saying. Like, there's, he did a good job of presenting that. And also, Josh Brolin just, has been since the Goonies good at being that like gruff guy who looks like he wants to punch you in the face at any moment. So I think he does well. I mean, I do think the core three of Daniel Craig, Josh O'Connor, and Glenn Close are the sort of three standouts here, but that's pretty obvious. And I won't belabor that. And we're going to have Josh O'Connor corner in a moment.
Well, and we will give Josh O'Connor his due, but don't ignore Brolin's 2025. Weapons, no. Running Man, and this are all three very different, but three heaters as well that probably deserve more attention. Antonio, any shout outs?
Despite this wonky accent work, I enjoy seeing Andrew Scott, and I thought that he played his like washed up lost author pretty well. So I enjoyed him, even though, everyone outside of the sort of central three didn't have as much to do. I still felt like everyone had a distinct like character and personality. And no one felt like they were just sort of like in the background. They just weren't as instrumental to the plot. Jen, how about you?
We haven't said his name yet, but I want to give a shout out to Jeffrey Wright.
Yeah,
I'm always happy to see him, but I was like, man, he makes Priest look super cool. Like, he's just like such a cool guy, because he's doing the thing where he's like dressing down Father Judd, but at the same time he's like, I get it, it's fine. Like, I get like he just seems like a really great mentor figure, and he's not in the movie very much, but I liked that they brought him back at the end. I thought that was fun.
And he was a surprise, right? That was a shock to me when I saw it, right?
Yeah, I didn't know.
I don't think that had been promoted. Remember that Rian and Rom, their production company is T Street, who produced American Fiction and helped get that project underway. So in my narrative, it was like a thank you, like, yeah, I'll show up. And I told my wife that at the end when he says punk ass bitch, you're like, I don't know that really makes sense, but also if I had Jeffrey Wright on set for one day and could get him to say punk ass bitch, I would do so and not hesitate to weave this in. I love the gag about Andrew Scott having the fans who look like John Goodman in The Big Lebowski. The final moment was so good to me. And another shout out to my wife who works in publishing. She explained to me that there's a shot of his manuscript where it says it's 700,000 words. That is like insane. Like a really good manuscript is so much shorter than that. And then at the end he says, I'm going to write one more chapter and then let's call Random House. And so she loved those gags, having related a lot and worked with a lot of kind of self-published authors who would write something of that nature. I knew I would get away with calling Andrew Scott favorite of the LTRs because I know we all loved his movie with Jen's beloved Paul Mescal, the name of which I'm forgetting.
All of Us Strangers.
All of Us Strangers. I promoted Kaylee Spaney because I have come to look forward to her all the time now. Jen and I reviewed Priscilla on this show, which she carried and was very much shorter than Elordi, is mainly what I remember. No, she was very good and had to play like this wide age range. Antonia and I both saw and enjoyed Civil War, which she centered in. PT eventually got to it, but he doesn't get credit because he didn't.
I watched it too.
I actually no, Jen saw it.
Yeah,
Jen
want to watch it.
To it late. All right, I'm doing pretty well remembering everybody's casual viewing. I'll take the loss on that one, but and then we all enjoyed Alien Romulus. I don't think Antonio was on that one, but she kind of carried that. So I have just found her to be reliable and completely agree. I saw a Letterboxd review of this movie that said cut out like 20% of Jeremy Renner and give it to Kaylee Spaney, and this would be a masterpiece. And I do like that idea, but she's got a little bit of space there. This idea of somebody who, is desperate to be healed feels a little old fashioned in this kind of mix, like, very snake oil salesman. But I do like her arc, and I like the message of her arc, which is as PT referred to earlier, the daily bread message, right? So the final Josh O'Connor voiceover as she's playing a beautiful song. I'm just going to pretend it's her playing, "'Tis a Gift" on her cello. But it says some of us just need to find the strength to get up and do what we're supposed to do every day, despite the pain, and that's daily bread. Which I tried so hard to make work as Jen's intro quote, but it was too long. It didn't fit. It didn't flow. So, but Jen, you do come on to the podcast every week and do what you're supposed to do despite the pain, which we respect, of hanging out with us. So, so that would be my shout out, and I do really like. All right, who wants first crack at Josh O'Connor? And are we just saying he's great? What makes Josh O'Connor so great in this, and what makes him a revelation? Is this just another in an incredibly good year for him, or is this really something special? Let's go to Antonio first on Josh O'Connor.
So my introduction to Josh O'Connor was from The Crown, the Netflix series, where I thought he was really excellent, but he played a very specific character based obviously on a real person. And so, and he won an Emmy for that. And it's been interesting to see how his evolution as a leading man has gone, because I think that there are a lot of actors who hew to a particular type, right? Like Jonah Hill plays like a version of like the same character in a lot of his movies, and other actors suffer the same, have the same sort of like thing. But with Josh O'Connor, when you look at like The Crown, The History of Sound, Challengers, La Chimera, it's a wide range of things that he's doing. And like he has also a very distinctive look and a very distinctive face, right? And so I think the fact that he can play all of these characters so convincingly, and he can use like his physicality and everything about him to such different effects. It goes back to sort of what my observation of like the Knives Out films themselves was, that every film is sort of its own thing. With Josh O'Connor, every character is his own like creation that doesn't feel like just like a variation of just like his personality or who his publicist has decided he wants to, like the market that he wants to sort of corner. He feels like very exciting as like an actor who's just seeking roles that are interesting to him. And so by nature of him just signing on to a project, I'm sort of automatically interested because he's shown such good taste. And then he does a lot with the material that he's given. What do you all think?
I'm going to jump in here, and what I'm about to say sounds like a bit, but I want to say it's dead serious, so it's not a bit. Like PT, my algorithm has been full of interview clips, and then Josh O'Connor, I guess, just hosted Saturday Night Live, so I saw a few of those ads promoting it. I'm very excited to watch that. I did not see it. And so the part that sounds like a bit is, I actually forgot he was Irish, right? That like, it's Josh O'Connor. It could not be more obvious, but like you hear him speak as himself and you're like, oh, right, he's Irish and he has a thick accent, which you would never believe. I watched La Chimera and I would have assumed he was Italian, right? Like he so naturally does that voice and that culture and so on. So, Jen, that wasn't a joke. All right. It's not a bit. So I will pass it back to you, Jen, and ask, you're our normie correspondent. Do you think Josh O'Connor has now arrived, or is he still a like, who is that if you mention his name to like your average moviegoer?
Great question, Greg. I think this movie could be that moment. You know what I mean? Because I'm looking at his filmography. He has really impeccable taste and has done really cool projects, but nothing beyond Challengers. I don't know. And even that was like, maybe it was more popular, but wasn't mainstream. I would say like it found a large niche audience, right? Rather than like, oh, it's the thing that that it's not the movie everyone was watching over the holidays or something with their families, right? But I think Wake Up Dead Man can be classified as that kind of movie, right? That so I have to admit that I didn't have a chance to rewatch this on Netflix because I was about to, and I was going to be like, let's fire it up. But then my mother-in-law emailed us to be like, oh, have you seen the new Knives Out movie? If not, we will wait until you get here and watch it over Christmas. And John hasn't seen it yet. So I was like, oh, I guess I can't put this on the TV because that will violate this agreement that we have to wait to watch it with them. And so I think like if enough people see this movie, then he will become a more household name potentially because he's so good in it. And I think, to go back to your question about like what makes him so good in this, why is he so good in it? I feel like part of it is that he's really selling the sort of like inner demons that Father Judd has, which we haven't really talked about his boxing background, but that is a huge part of that character, right? That he became a priest because he reached rock bottom and felt like he was so disillusioned with himself and was like, what am I doing? And then found his faith, and that really helped him. And so I feel like that's the core of his character that's kind of like simmering underneath, that you get a sense that even though he is able to keep up with Daniel Craig in terms of like the goofy factor and the comedic timing and the antics of solving this mystery, that deep down he does have kind of this darker core that is really fueling his faith, right? And that his struggle throughout the film of like not just like about faith in general, but about his ability to be a priest, right? Can I do this? Am I fit to do this? Is this my calling, right? There's so much self-doubt that he has throughout the movie that like a scene like when he's on the phone with that one woman, right? That they're calling for a clue, but then she ends up needing him as, in a moment of tragedy, right? Like I can't actually remember. Is it like someone in her family has died or something like that? It's terrible.
Her mom is dying and from some kind of brain tumor that makes her say awful things. And the woman fought with her and now the mother won't speak to her. So she's afraid the mom will die with those having been the last thing she'll say.
Yeah. And so like that scene does not contribute to the mystery plot at all. You could describe it as kind of a digression, but it is 100% critical to like his character development. So I think he's supporting what the screen, because like if you think about another actor who isn't kind of digging deep like that into the character, like I think the movie as a whole just doesn't have as much richness as we're kind of picking up on in terms of the themes and stuff like that.
PT, noted heterosexual, can Josh O'Connor still get it?
For sure. 100%. Although I will say, like, I feel like I'm the least, like, I'm in love with Josh O'Connor of all of us because I was the like, I liked Challengers. I don't think I've ever really thought about it again since it ended, but that's okay. And I've missed. I'm behind on my movie watching, so I have still need to catch up on his two of his movies, History of Sound and The Mastermind, that have come out this year. And I also never watched beyond the first season of The Crown. So there's just a lot of missing Josh O'Connor along the way. But he's so good in this movie. To stand in maybe for the normies of just sort of like, oh, like Josh O'Connor, I have to apologize. I didn't recognize your game. Was quite this good. And that like, what I had seen him in, he was always very strong, but all that nuance that Jen was talking about is so crucial. Plus he's up against Daniel Craig, who's our returning character, who we already love from the two, not against, they're actually, because as Greg was saying earlier, they actually are highly respectful of each other, but he's in a lot of scenes with Daniel Craig and it would be very easy for Benoit Blanc to just steamroll over that character. But we'll eventually, not yet, I'm not setting up a transition, we'll eventually get into Oscars watch. It's category fraud that he's being campaigned in supporting actor because he's clearly the lead of this movie, in the same way that Ana de Armas was the lead in the original Knives Out. So yeah, he has to carry a lot in his back, and I think he does a very good job of being believable and vulnerable, but also having those sparks of, he has that like fight in him that he's trying to not give into. So I think all of that is great. The one thing I will say to potentially be on the other side of not just praising him is, Greg, he's not actually Irish. He's of Irish descent, born, raised, lived his entire life in England. So he is English. That accent is English and not Irish, despite his name being Josh O'Connor and his face.
Well. How the tables have turned. I had that same thought earlier and was like, I can't be the one to correct Greg, because that will just stoke the flames of our fake Irish feud.
Wow, I can't believe you referred to the Troubles as a fake Irish feud. That's insane.
Well, I will take my comeuppance on that one. And I think you all have covered it. I just want to note that I get to take a victory lap on Hype Draft this year. I think because I for one have seen all of my Hype Draft movies. I think 2 of you failed to see them all. PT, have you caught up now?
Yeah, I've seen all of them. Oh yeah, The Materialist. Yeah,
it took you a solid 6 months to get to Materialist, but you're there now.
It's fine.
Antonio, you've seen all yours?
I think so. Hamnet was on mine, and yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. And Jen, you still
I haven't seen Running Man. I just realized.
That's what brought it to mind, is I referenced Running Man and nobody else has seen Running Man, including most of America. But hey, some of us still follow the Glenn Powell Church.
I'm sorry,
as well.
Glenn Powell.
Well, so I actually went very heavy on Josh O'Connor, not because I was so devoted to him. As we said in that episode, which people should go watch, History of Sound. As PT said, it's now available on Mubi. You can get that 7-day free trial. Just make up an email address and watch for 7 days. That is a great performance, and I was devoted to that because I had read the book and I was really excited to see that translated. And then I took The Mastermind as my kind of small art house pick because I really loved the films of Kelly Reichardt. So it wasn't even that it was Josh O'Connor; it was that it was her next film.
He was just in so many movies that the likelihood of you picking him was very high.
And so I could have picked Rebuilding as my 4th. I didn't know Rebuilding existed. And that's another one that I'm getting constant ads for, I think, because I mentioned Wake Up Dead Man. So on Instagram, I'm just getting endless ads for it, which it's actually hard to find. I think I can go at like 10 a.m. on Wednesday, maybe, and see it, but then it's not around. So yeah, it's been a crazy year. I really love his performance here. I can't actually choose between the 3. And what's remarkable about this year is that they're all so different, and he's really doing incredible work in all 3. So highly recommend you catch up on the rest of Josh O'Connor from 2025 if you haven't.
So other signs that he may be at this pivot point of going from character actor to leading man potentially is he is going to star opposite Emily Blunt in a untitled Steven Spielberg film. And and I put this in the chat just because I was like, I didn't know this existed, and I was like delighted by it. He is also going to be in a gothic mystery film by Joel Cohen. So, and he's the only name attached to it looks like, and it's filming right. Or sorry, Francis. The other cast includes Frances McDormand, Leslie Manville, and Damian Lewis. So
you
that
lost me
great.
at one Cohen brother. Sorry,
it's the one who did Macbeth and not the one who did the other ones. But I thought the Coens were getting back together. I didn't realize they're doing one more separate. Okay. Anyway.
All right.
Interesting.
Okay.
So as we wrap up the kind of general discussion, does anybody have any points that haven't made their way in or anything at all? I did have a question here about the lighting effect. So I saw this movie with a Q&A attached to the back. And the guy who was doing this live Q&A broadcast just to Alamo Drafthouse Theaters asked how Rian Johnson cued the sun, like he really thought that this was possible. And Rian Johnson, of course, explained the entire church is actually a soundstage. There was no actual church building, and that his lighting director created basically like a a board where they could change the weather and have these moments. So I'm just going to go on record. I understand what they were doing with the lighting effects. I thought they were a bit much. I thought like the points about faith were there without making God's light actually shine down on Daniel Craig. Does anybody else have any moments or things they haven't fit in?
I mean, it was a bit much, but I kind of liked it. I was just like, sure, why not? Like, there's enough of a flourish, especially for a movie that does kind of want you to question for at least a few minutes. Like, did this guy really come back to life? Like, we saw his dead body, and Benoit Blanc said "wiggly, wiggly" while he rubbed his dead flesh, but then he walked out. So I think that that kind of heavy-handed lighting effect, I think, can set you up to think like, wait a minute, is this actually going to go there? And it didn't. I mean, I will just say, with all due respect to Antonio, who gets stuck with a lot of Star Wars references, that from the director of The Last Jedi, getting the little young wannabe JD Vance alt-right Catholic convert from a character say the like, we'll rule together as father and son, and the priest go, do you mean like it's Star Wars? And he's like, yeah, like the rebels. And it's like, right, like people who watch Star Wars and don't understand that they're the bad guys, like that everything they're doing is in line with the bad guys, but no, they think they're the rebels standing up against the thing they don't like is the Empire. So that was magical.
The Q&A brought that up as well, and Rian Johnson said directly, he's like, yeah, I think a lot of people need to be told they're not the rebels. So like, you're right, you're dead on with his opinion on that. He also referenced Star Wars because in convincing his producers to hold off on Benoit Blanc that long, the winning argument was that Han Solo does not show up in A New Hope for a solid 45 minutes, and you'd never know because you love him so much once he does. So.
Although I will note the thing that I think a lot of people, when I've seen a lot of the comments about like, wow, it takes a long time for Benoit Blanc to show up, which Greg, I think you mentioned earlier, is not strange for Agatha Christie book stories, is not strange for Poirot movies, is not strange for, I mean, that's the whole setup of Columbo, is he doesn't show up till Act 2 for each installment. But the first, if not the first shot of the movie, like one of the first shots is we see Benoit Blanc is reading this story. So he is there in the very beginning. And then it's, I guess, easy to forget that this is a story being told to him. But that seemed to be the cheat about just like, don't worry, like he's here, folks. You see him, and that will recess into the back of your mind, and you might be surprised. But
that was going to be my last shout out, and I just want to add to that I really liked the kind of really small twist of that letter writing trope, where you kind of assume for most of that first act that Father Judd has written a letter to Benoit Blanc explaining what happened and asking for help, but in fact it's Benoit Blanc being like, no, you sit here and write this for me. Which I just thought that was very funny and unexpected.
Well, now you made me think of two more. So I also love, again, from my the recesses of my faith-based mind, I always loved the parable that you hear repeated a lot about, like the man who is on top of his house during a flood, and his neighbors all come to help him, and then he dies, and he's like, God, why didn't you send help? And he's like, I sent all those people to help you, and you were just waiting for me. This is a very familiar old kind of lesson from church, and I love that there's kind of, in my opinion, a play on that, where Father Judd is like, please God, just help me, send someone to show me the way. And Benoit Blanc throws open the door and goes, hello. Just beautifully done. Gets a huge reaction in every time I saw it in the theater. And I will also say the other moment that gets a huge shout out is when Glenn Close drops Jeremy Renner down the stairs at the end, and the dead body just clunks all the way down every step. I don't know how they did that. It's very well done, and that's probably the biggest laugh I heard every single time I saw this in the theater. So, all right, we've spent a lot of time on heavier themes. We think we've kind of covered rhetorical situations, so we will just go ahead and jump directly to Oscars Watch. So even though it's no longer our tagline, we like to always keep one eye on the Oscar race, and it is that time of year. So I'm just going to say very broadly, what are this film's Oscar chances? Let's go to PT.
They're not great because I think that this really gets kind of put into two boxes that are not helpful at the Oscars. One is the genre box, where it's just sort of like, this is just like a mystery movie. It's light and it's fun and it's fine, but there you go. It's in there. And like when the first Knives Out was released, I believe it did get a screenplay nomination. And that was a surprise. Like, even though it was a big success and a lot of people really liked it, and there were all these great actors in it, there was not really a lot of, didn't feel like there was a lot of momentum towards people in the way that if we were doing this show, then I think we would have been like, well, wait a minute, like, could this be like this should have all these different nominations. So that's that feels a little bit like that's the ceiling, because it's just sort of put in the genre box. But then the other boxes, it's the Netflix box, which is, good for Rian Johnson. He got a lot of money to make these two, like Glass Onion and Wake Up Dead Man. But that has also sort of siloed them into only being in theaters for a short window, and also not, the Netflix has other priorities in general whenever they're putting out their for your consideration energies and money. And so there's Frankenstein, and there's Jay Kelly, and there's the third movie, Train Dreams, and all of those are to varying degrees getting a foothold in at least like they're different spots in the race. And it has felt all along like Wake Up Dead Man was their fourth on their list of things that they would push, which is a shame, because I do think there's some space for some nominations that I would like it to get, but I don't think it's particularly likely. Antonio, what do you think?
Fortunately, that's probably right. In terms of like the order likelihood, I would say Glenn Close, Josh O'Connor, and then screenplay. That I'd probably put them in that order. I think that Glenn Close has like a classic, like Oscar-y kind of like character work there, a supporting actress character work. Josh O'Connor is classic, as PT said, category fraud, but like, a way to honor him for having just an amazing year. But I think, yeah, the chances are pretty slim. What do you think, Jen?
I think this is going to get a big goose egg in terms of Oscar noms. It just, honestly, it hasn't shown up in enough places by now for it to even be a possibility. So it didn't get nominated for Critics' Choice, didn't get into Golden Globes, and those were the places that if it did have signs of life that it should have shown up in. So I don't know. I think like in my head, like maybe a month ago, I would have been like, oh, maybe save a spot in an adapted screenplay, but I don't even think that's a possibility now.
But because the movie only just got to Netflix, is it possible now that it's like, okay, folks will actually have had a chance to see this, will they actually start to say, let's really campaign Glenn Close? Let's really, and then could there be, I would say, Antonio, I think adapted screenplay might be the most likely, only because there's 10 versus 5.
The track record is there.
And the track record is there. And also it's sort of like looking at the roster of potential adapted screenplays. It's like the fifth spot is kind of flexible. It's actually sort of the Netflix spot. Is it going to be Wake Up Dead Man, Frankenstein, or Train Dreams? Assuming the first 4 are One Battle After Another, Hamnet, Begonia, and No Other Choice. And even that might be overly ambitious about No Other Choice. I want No Other Choice to get into there, but I don't know. It could be, like, it could very easily be. But
I think in terms of precursors, No Other Choice has had a better past few weeks than Wake Up Dead Man. So I would put No Other Choice in before I put Wake Up Dead Man in that category.
I don't disagree with anything you've said. I think, Jen, your beloved Katie Rich was really hoping Josh O'Connor could pull out a Best Actor in the Golden Globes because you get the double categories, as we discussed last week. But seeing as that didn't happen, when you all had seen this and I hadn't, my first question was, come on, please, let's get Glenn Close one just so she stops doing these awful projects that she's done. I'm looking at you, Hillbilly Elegy. Whatever the one was where and it was actually her and Mila Kunis, and Mila Kunis was addicted to painkillers. Do you remember this one? It was
I didn't see
terrible.
it.
Yeah, it was
I know what
terrible.
you're talking about.
Terrible.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a lot of hope here. I think, as I would recall the race, I think in September and October people were saying if it's a soft year, then this will sneak in. And I think we've just seen, by and large, everything's coming in strong and better than anticipated kind of since summer. So, but that's okay. I won't actually seriously ask this question. I will just reword it as a statement and say, I think Benoit Blanc is the best dressed character who will never have earned a best costume, design. And the algorithm recently showed me Daniel Craig saying he just goes from the position of Benoit Blanc loves clothes and then talks to the costume designer and they figure it out. And so it totally works. The real race I want to push for is I think it is a crime that Glass Onion and presumably Wake Up Dead Man aren't available on physical media, and that these are to have to watch these on Netflix is awful and fits into our conversation last week / the future about the Warner Brothers Netflix potential deal, because it's a shame. And while I had zero hope forever, I will say just within the last 5 minutes, I got the announcement email for the March Criterion Collection, which I'm sure at least PT did too. And Killers of the Flower Moon is coming to the Criterion Collection. So at least some streamers are thinking about those prestige releases. So maybe a Criterion box set of the Benoit Blanc movies could happen someday.
There have been in the past, I think the only physical media releases of Netflix original movies has been that way through Criterion. Roma and The Irishman, I know, were both put in the Criterion Collection. And I think there's a couple of others that I can't remember right now. Maybe Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. So yeah, I think that could happen. In saying that, I was like, oh, those are three directors who are, with all due respect, much bigger than Rian Johnson. So maybe there is some degree of, Rian Johnson's to push for it. I was wondering, could there be, a Criterion box set? But that also kind of brings me to what I was thinking of for a somewhat summative final question. What do we think there's going to be more Benoit Blanc movies? Is Rian Johnson just going to, he said when we saw him that he has something else lined up, that his next movie would not be this, but I feel like he keeps saying, as long as he has an idea and Daniel Craig likes it and he likes it, then they would keep doing it. But do we think that's actually going to happen? Or is this going to be the next version of his Star Wars trilogy that he talked about for a while and then eventually was quietly put to rest?
So am I correct in remembering that this movie marked the end of the Netflix deal?
Yes, it was a 2-movie deal.
And
T Street gets all the rights back. So they're totally free
amazing.
To do whatever they want.
So I would say that plus the recent news that Rian Johnson broke up with Peacock for Poker Face, but they're still somehow they're recasting Natasha Lyonne as Peter Dinklage, and then they're open to other distributors. That gives me hope that he will find a way to keep this going, because that makes no sense. I was like, I have so many questions about this news about Poker Face, which granted I didn't finish watching season 2, so the cancellation is on me. So I think it's gonna kind of rise from it's gonna go through a phoenix transformation of ending with Netflix and then rising from the ashes in a slightly different form with somewhere else.
Warner Brothers.
I would say give it a minute. Let's not do one in 2 years. Let's wait 5. But I think all you hear from both Daniel Craig and Rian Johnson is, as long as the other one's involved, they'll do them. I like had a glimmer of hope that, this might be the defining character for Daniel Craig's life, but it's like there's no way James Bond isn't line one of the resume, or
Very
the
true.
obituary, or the resume, but the obituary when it comes. But it does seem like, if this keeps going on, there's possibility for it. So
it's the second thing mentioned on his LinkedIn. It is like abstract.
I was going to say, known for playing iconic characters such as James Bond and Benoit Blanc. I don't know how that sounds.
But it is funny because I do think what I love about this is it's a wholly original franchise, and yet now I'm rooting for it to become a way too long in the tooth, bitter old franchise, which is just being a modern film lover. It seems whatever you think. So, all right. With that, I think we have now popped the perfidious bubble of belief sufficiently and can move on to our own plugs. So, if listeners have enjoyed this talk, and Lord help you if you're here, you must have at this point. Antonio, where could listeners find you taken to the pulpit?
Find me on Letterboxd at Aelefano, Aelefano. Jen, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI, and on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jen. PT, where can people find you and the show?
Well, they can find me on Letterboxd at PT McNiff, PTMCNIFF. You can also find the show there at LTR Pod. You can look for the show on social media, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. You can email us, thelongtakereview@gmail.com. Or you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Hit add, hit like, hit plus, hit follow, whatever the mechanism is on your podcast feed of choice. Greg, where can folks find you?
People can find me on Instagram and Letterboxd at IonCanon, EYEONCANON, where I will be actively logging films while Jen does her normal hosting duty on all future episodes. So with that, my dear friends, we will call an end to this. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
I just realized we didn't talk about Road to Damascus.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
Wow.